שמחה רבה, שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע פסח בשמחה רבה, שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע פסח בתפרו, תפרו, תפרו לי בגד עם כיסים מלאו.
We usually think of the Haggadah as just a mishmash of different sources that were put together, which is kind of true. But I believe that there is a method to this structure, that there's a subtext which runs throughout it, which is both a Zionist ideology, basically. The Haggadah reflects the idea that the leaving of Egypt was just the beginning of a long process, the process of making of the people. And the process of the making of the people was not concluded until they entered the land of Israel and became the rulers of the land and were able to implement their idea of a just and equal society through the laws of the Torah within a country, within a land, a state. And I see a kind of, as in many cases there's a structure from the beginning and the end, which frames this ideology, and actually the whole ideology can be found in the beginning and the end, and then it appears in different ways throughout the middle. What's the beginning of the Maggid? The beginning is Hanania. This is the bread of affliction, or the bread of poverty, which our ancestors ate while enslaved in Egypt, right? Any hungry person may come and eat with us. Any needy person may come and celebrate Passover with us. Hacha, today, some of us are here in exile. Next year, maybe we'll be in the land of Israel. Today, some of us are enslaved. Next year, may we be a free people. Now notice the parallels here. Notice that there are three kind of sets to each value concepts, which relate to time, place, and status. Time is now and next year. Place is here in exile, in Eretz Yisrael. And status is slaves, free people. The parallelism clarifies that the value concepts of this section, today we are here in exile enslaved, is parallel to next year in the land of Israel will be a free people. At the very beginning of the Maggid, the theological premise which runs throughout the whole structure of this portion of the Haggadah, which is the main portion of the Haggadah, is exile and slavery go together, place and existential status are connected. Where you live does make a difference in terms of your essential existential status, and that the only place where Israel can be free is in the land of Israel. This same idea is repeated in the last segment of the Maggid, the Nirtzah, right? The Nirtzah, where we say, well, Passover has ended, we've done everything as best we could, maybe we recite it again next year, right? And how are we going to recite it? Where are we going to recite it? In Sion, right? In the land of Israel, singing songs, joyous chanting. We end by going to Eretz Yisrael next year and say, then what do we say after the Nirtzah? Shana Ba'a B'Yerushalayim. Next year we'll all be in Jerusalem. In the very language, the Haggadah framework draws out this idea. Now, you say, well, we know that exile isn't exactly slavery all the time, but the idea is that if you're not your own boss, if you aren't the one who's in charge, you're always open to feeling of being controlled from the outside. And I think that that framework is found in many other parts of the Haggadah. L'mashal, the four sons. Let's take the four sons. Why is the Rasha a Rasha? Why is it called a Rasha? Now we know that in the original Hebrew text of the Midrash Halakha, the Mechilta, he's called Tipesh, right? There's a chacham. The opposite of chacham is tipesh. But many other versions of this midrash call him rasha. Why? What does that have to do with anything? And I believe it's connected to the context, which is the Passover sacrifice. Who's the rasha in the Passover sacrifice? Moses says, we're going to leave Israel. God is going to take us out. And there's plague after plague after plague. Everyone is suffering. 9 plagues. And Moses says, now we're going to leave. We don't leave. We're still here. Then Moses says, oh, one more, just one more, and we're out of here. But now before we leave, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to take this lamb, keep it by your house, sacrifice it, put the blood on the lintels of the doorposts so that it can be seen from the outside, right? And then eat it in the house before you leave. And I could see Jews saying, wait a minute, right? 9 times this has not worked. Now you tell us it's going to work. Fine, let's say you're right. But this is dangerous. If I mark my house so that people from the outside can see I'm doing something, I think I'm going to be free, I think I'm going to leave this slavery, what about all of these Egyptians running around here beating us and the people who are controlling our lives? What are they going to say? They're going to say, what? Are you rebellious? Are you sedition? And we're going to get beaten or maybe even killed. This is dangerous, Moses. Up to now we didn't do anything. The plague just happened. Why do we have to do something on this plague? The Midrash understands this to be a test. Who's willing to put themselves in danger in order to achieve freedom? And the same Midrash, on when it says that the children of Israel left Israel chamushim, alu chamushim min haaretz. Now, chamushim literally means they were armed, they had weapons. But the Midrash says 1 in 5 left. And the Midrash goes on to say, some say 1 in 50, and so forth, even more. In other words, most people were afraid to do this. Now, Dayenu, which is built on a palindrome, the same word backwards and forwards, Ilu, Hotzianu miMitzrayim, Velo, right? Asa Bahem Shvatim, for example. Ilu means if this had happened, if only this had happened. And Velo means and not this. But Ilu and Velo are palindrome. It's the same letter backwards and forwards, right? And it's interesting that this whole kind of poetic description of the process, remember, we're talking about a process that only begins with leaving Egypt, but ends with entering the land of Israel and becoming the ones who implement the Torah laws in Israel. That's where Dayenu takes us. Dayenu doesn't stop with leaving Egypt. It says we went to the desert, God took care of us there, He brought us into the land of Israel, He enabled us to build the Beit HaMikdash. Why is all that part of the Seder? Because it's the process that's important. And here's another palindrome for you. You may not have thought of this. Dayenu, what's that backwards in Hebrew? V'nayad. V'nayad and wandering. Right? We would still be wandering if we hadn't gotten into the land of Israel. So I believe that there is a kind of a subtext. There are many more little bits like that throughout the Maggid, which I could bring you. We celebrate the leaving of Egypt, but we only see that as a means to an end, a necessary means to an end. You can't be a slave and then be in charge of a nation. But once you have left slavery, you want to, it's not enough just not to be a slave. You want to be a person that has a society which is just and honest and merciful. And this is what the Torah commands us, all of the laws of the Torah, and the way that we hope that we will implement them in the future.
Simcha Rabba, Aviv Higia, Pesach Ba, Simcha Rabba, Aviv Higia, Pesach Ba.